Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first of our Winter by the Sea special sessions to keep marine and coastal volunteers and our community engaged with our beautiful Victorian marine and coastal environment through the winter months, and particularly while we're sitting in our own lounge rooms and work studies, etc., in isolation. Hopefully this is a good chance for you to hear about some wonderful things that are happening across Victoria, and particularly this week being National Volunteer Week. I want to acknowledge the great work contribution that volunteers make across Victoria, and in particular our passionate marine and coastal volunteers who contribute so much to looking after our beautiful coastline. Today, we're very privileged to have Andrew Christie talking to us as a terrific example of a volunteer who has been putting in over many years in terms of the area that he works, at Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary. But more on that later. Before we get started, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet collectively. I'm in the area of the Wadawurrung people, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to the elders and traditional owners across Victoria, wherever you may be. Today's very much a bit of a learning curve for some of us. We have sitting behind the scenes the wonderful Catherine Dyson, who's going to be providing technical support. So if you do have any challenges connecting in the information that was sent out to you this morning or earlier this afternoon, Catherine's number's there that you can use to check in basically if you have any difficulties with the technology. If you haven't already done so, what I'd love you to do, if you wouldn't mind, please, is to just simply pop your name into the text box on the side. You can certainly make comments, you can ask questions, as well as simply acknowledge the fact that you're here in the meeting, and say good day to everybody else who's online as well by adding your name and your location to the information in the text box on the side. If you are going to ask a question, there's actually an option of being anonymous. It's up to you whether you decide to do that. But if there are questions we don't get time to answer today, we'd be very happy to follow up using your details. If you can leave your questions with a name, we can follow up afterwards. You can also make sure that please that you're aware of the fact that this is a one-way session in the sense that you can only see and hear what's going on. You won't be able to speak to the presenter, but certainly your questions will be acknowledged, and we'll do our best to answer those. The format for the afternoon is essentially we're going to have Andrew present to us for around about half an hour or so. Following up that, there'll be a question and answer session in which we'll do our best to get Andrew to answer the questions, and the curly ones, as said, we'll take them on notice. Moving back to talking about our presenter for this afternoon. So we've got basically a situation where we've got a wonderful presentation this afternoon on the sharks and rays of the Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary, the monitoring work that Andrew's been doing. Andrew is a well-known volunteer across Victoria and has been involved for many years in monitoring at Point Cooke. One of the things that I've really enjoyed about having Andrew as our first speaker today is that he's very typical of Victorian marine and coastal volunteers. He's somebody who essentially gives of himself, who tries to provide support for other members of his group. He's passionate about his environment. He's very active, supports, generously gives of his time with all sorts of groups. And we're really delighted to have Andrew present to us this afternoon. When he's not volunteering and spending his time with his head under the water at Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary, Andrew's a lecturer in aquaculture at Melbourne Polytechnic, aquaculture and marine biology at Melbourne Polytechnic, but a lot of his time is spent outside of that working environment as a passionate volunteer as the president of Marine Care Point Cooke. Without further ado then, I'll hand over to you, Andrew, and hopefully all the things will start to go well. So you might like to just start by saying g'day to everyone for a start.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thanks to everyone out there who's joining us today. I really hope that you enjoy this presentation. I'm just switching over to slide view now. Just thinking about it. Here we go. All right. Please, Mark, or anyone out there, if you can't hear or see me, just let me know.
Okay, Andrew. Just before we get started, could you just make sure that you're sharing the presentation, because it hasn't come up on my screen at this point.
Right. No worries. Just give me 1 sec. I'll just go back to it. Share. Okay. We're seeing it now. It's probably thinking about it.
Yeah, we're almost there.
Yep. Anything coming through?
I've got the fact that I've got your desktop. Can you just try and just make sure that it's reconnecting again and just hit the? Here we go. We're all good to go. Thanks, Andrew.
Excellent. No worries. I'll jump over to the slideshow view, and again, Mark, please let me know if there's any dramas. Okay, how's that looking? Good. Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, so looking at shark and ray monitoring at Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary. Point Cooke, for those of you that don't know, is in Melbourne's west, and what I'll be doing today is just giving you an outline of some of the interesting critters that we see around the Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary. The same can be said for the northern Port Phillip Bay area, across to Jawbone Marine Sanctuary in Williamstown, and also our friends over at Beau Morris at Marine Care Ricketts Point with Ricketts Point Marine Sanctuary. Okay, the rays of Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary, what I'll be doing is having a discussion mainly around the rays and also a little bit on some of the sharks that we see in the area. It's got to be said that all of these animals that you're seeing today, despite sometimes having an undeserved reputation, they're really amazing animals to see in the wild. I think that's probably one of the key take-home messages from today is that as long as you see them, 10 times out of 10 you're going to be okay. It's only when you blunder across them or tread on them or anything like that that you can get yourself into trouble. The sharks at Point Cooke can generally gummy or Port Jackson sharks. The rays that I'll be discussing later, I'll go through each of those ones that you saw on that slide individually to give you a good idea of what we've got in the water there. Now, first of all, the question, why bother monitoring sharks and rays at Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary or anywhere for that matter? One of the key things is they've got what you call low fecundity. So that is they've got relatively low reproductive potential. They can be relatively late to mature and reach sexual maturity. They're very easily overexploited as a direct result of that. So it's always a really good idea to just keep an eye on numbers. And whether you do that with an underwater slate or probably best thing to do is just use a camera to capture stills footage and also video footage of the animals. It gives you a really good idea of things like seasonality, when you can expect to see the rays and sharks when they perhaps start to migrate and move out of the area. They're quite charismatic and interesting. I will never tire of looking at rays and sharks underwater. I think they're so graceful and amazing to see in their natural environment. They're relatively easy to see and detect, and you'll see from some of the shots today that does take a bit of practice. You want that sort of a search image, if you like, in your mind's eye of what they do look like, because that certainly is something that can keep you out of trouble. And they're potentially fantastic as citizen science research components, so they make a fantastic subject for study, as you'll see a little bit later on. And one of the best ways, and certainly one of the most enjoyable, is to record fish. The best way to record fish abundance in regards to sharks and rays, things like the Great Victorian Fish Count. Here's a shot from January 2018, where we all headed out to Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary. Got a bunch of volunteers and were ably supported by Parks Victoria. Mark Rodrigue features in this photograph as well, and members of Reef Watch from the Victorian National Parks Association also join us from time to time with these sorts of fish counts. So they're wonderful events and they get quite a bit of interest. Now, I was actually talking to Cade Mills from the VNPA in regards to what sort of species we could be on the lookout for, and this is what basically spurred us on to request that rays and sharks be added to the recording slates. And you can see here we've got, relatively very low numbers of fish. Overall, we've got a few dusky morwongs and globefish and things that we've seen, but then there's quite a few eastern shovel-nosed stingarees, and look at the southern fiddler rays there. This is one fantastic year where we sighted over 100 individuals, and that was from memory about 6 to 8 diving pairs, so around 16 odd people in the water, spread out around Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary, and we got that wonderful result of seeing so many of these fiddler rays. The Great Victorian Fish Count, not only did they pop them on the slates, but they started putting things like the great big smooth stingray that you see here, Port Jackson sharks, those sorts of things on the t-shirts. So that was a wonderful gesture on their part to recognise that we're not only looking for bony fish, but it's those ones the ones that have what you'd call a cartilaginous skeleton, a skeleton made of cartilage, namely the sharks and rays. And again, some data from 2015 to 2017, the total abundances, really spectacular numbers of southern fiddler rays that we've seen. Eastern shovelnose, also we see quite a few of those. The sparsely spotted stingaree, less so, but still significant numbers when you're getting out and about at Point Cooke. I only saw one last weekend, which is a little bit unusual because by this time of year they tend to have migrated out from Point Cooke, so there's still the odd vagrant around. Spotted or round stingarees we've started seeing more of in the last few years. We've got the southern eagle ray, the Port Jackson shark and the gummy shark, which I'll get into a little bit later on. Okay, so the southern fiddler rays, that's these guys here, gorgeous colour patterns. They're sometimes referred to as banjo sharks, but they're definitely a ray rather than being a shark species. Those two great big dorsal fins and that powerful, what you call a caudal fin, the tail, for propelling them through the water at a decent rate of knots. Happily, the southern fiddler ray is one of those things that cannot hurt you, and I'll just have a look at this. Next video. If she getting in really close to these rays. Of course, what you don't want to do is crowd them or touch them. I once heard a fantastic quote from Valerie Taylor, who said that when you are going to touch any sort of marine life like a southern fiddler ray, what you've got to do is touch them as gently as a shadow, and I think that's tremendous advice. Generally speaking, when you're in a marine sanctuary, it's always a good idea not to touch these sorts of animals, because you do freak them out a little bit from time to time, but also you've got to be absolutely sure that it is a southern fiddler ray, because if it's not, if it happens to be a sparsely spotted stingaree, you're going to be in for a pretty painful surprise. So one thing that we'd love to do one fine day is to start building up a photographic database of all these rays, and this is a technique that's been done for quite a few fish species. A really great example are great white sharks, where they take photographs of the dorsal fin, feed those into a software program, and they end up developing a really strong idea of who the resident animals are around, say, for example, seal colonies, because you can actually have a look at the dorsal fins and they've each got their own unique profile. Might well be applicable to things like southern fiddler rays, so it would make a hell of a citizen science project one day. And on this, I don't want to spend too much time on this because this is pretty damn depressing stuff, truth be known. But if you look at some of the unfortunate actions that we've seen around the Mornington Peninsula, particularly, we've had situations that have led to what we call the Raise Awareness and Project Banjo campaigns that have been put together, and that's because what fishermen were doing was capturing these rays and inflicting mortal wounds on them with things like filleting knives or whatever. This particular ray, you can see, has been sliced right through the rostrum, the snout in other words, and right through to the brain, right through the head. We've been seeing situations where there's these mortally wounded rays sitting on the benthos, and the reason for that is probably that they've been taking baits. People realise, well, they don't want to take them home and eat them, so they've been hideously injuring them and then throwing them back into the water. So like I said, there was some nice peaceful protests around these things with the Raise Awareness and Project Banjo campaigns, and it met with success from the Victorian Fisheries Authority, explaining that they were changing the legislation and you weren't to catch rays within 400 metres of any pier or jetty. So that was an action that was put in place to try and combat these sorts of acts of animal cruelty that we were seeing quite unfortunately quite regularly for a little while there. It was one of those things that caught our undivided attention when we started seeing all these stories in the media, and it sort of coincided with a situation where we suddenly started seeing a lot less southern fiddler rays around Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary. So the question mark there, is it any cause for concern? Partially, but since then, the situation has been rectified. So when you're doing sampling like this, that tends to be fairly sporadic across the board. What you've got to remember is that, if you're only looking at a few data points across the board, like we're seeing here, for say, for example, fish counts, it can come down to, climatic conditions, environmental conditions. It can come down to all a range of different factors. So to go from 43 to a high of 102 and then dropping right back down to 12, you'd think, oh, hang on, it must be these rays that are migrating from Blairgowrie and coming up to Point Cooke, getting intercepted at Blairgowrie, never making it. Very simplistic. I'm happy to report that since then, the ray numbers have picked right back up. So whether that was, that could, like I said, you've got to be careful of the way that you dress up this data and the way you interpret it. Another common ray species is the eastern shovel-nosed stingery. For those that are interested, Trigonoptera imitata. This is a ray that we see quite a bit around Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary, and the key one of the key take-home messages is when you see depressions in the sand like this, that tells you you're getting warm. That tells you that there's rays in the water that have been in the area when you see depressions like this one. And sometimes you'll see them in water that's less than knee deep. So you do have to be quite careful when you're getting out into the shallow water to make sure that you don't get, as you'd say, ankle tapped by one of these. If someone stepped on your head, you'd take pretty strong action. That's all these rays are doing, using that defensive armament. Just to make it very clear, rays are not those sort of things that are going to come after you in the shallows and try and deliberately whip you with their tail. And this is what I was talking about before with the search image. You get surprisingly good looking at a sparsely spotted stingery like this one. You do get surprisingly good after a while of being able to anticipate and look for the eyes and what we call the spiracles, the accessory breathing organs that are in the side of the head. Here, if you look carefully, you can see towards the right-hand side of that photograph, you do have the spiracles that are open, and that's letting an accessory current of water come in and flood the gills. As the animal's lying flat, it's not able to bring in much water at all via the mouth, so it's got those upward facing spiracles that it uses to divert currents down and oxygenate those gills. Getting towards the edge of seagrass beds are a key haunt of the rays. Again, not to be alarmed if you find yourself in a position like this where you're directly over the top of the ray. Number one rule, don't panic. Number two rule, move nice and slowly. Just glide straight over, and the animal's going to sit there 10 times out of 10 and think, oh, well, this person hasn't seen me, and you're going to skim straight over the top without even disturbing them. Looking at the ray here, can you spot this particular ray sitting next to a boulder there that's festooned with sea urchins? If you look closely, you will see the evidence of the spiracles and that broad outline of the ray. And they will use the pectoral fins to basically flap and dump water right over the top of themselves. So here's another quick video here. This is how you approach a ray. So this is the same one next to that boulder, and as you can see, you can get in nice and close, move nice and slow. Try not to dive bomb them. Don't come right down directly on top. And the other thing to note there is that you don't want to have a situation where you come down and then go right on top of a ray that you didn't know was there. So you've got to check that landing zone, so to speak, and make sure that it is clear. Learning to anticipate their behaviour is another thing too. When you are getting quite close like that, bear in mind, as this one here that was actually photographed at straight over the top of a seagrass bed, I've just crowded this ray a little bit and it's swinging around and it's doing two things. One is it's pointing away from me, and two, it's bringing that defensive armament to bear so that if I do reach out and try and grab it, it's going to whip along with those the double stinging barbs that it has there, and it's going to try and crack me in the hand. Remember that that's a defensive armament purely. It's not going to use that in an offensive capacity, come at me and try and stab me. So here's what happens when you disturb an eastern shovelnose. You can see getting up nice and slowly and moving away. And this is why I love watching rays, those nice undulations, the pectoral fins. They're such beautiful animals to observe. This one clearly not too fussed. I'm moving in nice and slowly, and it's not overly alarmed. Otherwise, it would have left me for dead and just taken off at a very high rate of knots. They're capable of enormous bursts of speed, these magnificent animals. Sparsely spotted stingery. Again, we see these. You can see where it gets its name. Those beautiful white spots on that sort of fawn background with the very distinct yellow-coloured eyes, and also this white trim margin around them. These are a beautiful animal to observe in the wild. Lovely photographic subject. And this is what happens. This is a very different departure to the one you saw before. This is what happens when you crowd a sparsely spotted stingery. This was taken at Jawbone Marine Sanctuary, and I actually flinched when I saw this vision back again. Just getting in a little too close, bang, that explosive movement upwards. So I'm not sure who was more sort of freaked out by that experience. I think I certainly took a few backward steps, so to speak. Yeah, they've got that enormous capacity for that burst of speed when they need it. They can actually extend those pectoral fins. They're very, very flexible, and they power down and away they go. So they've got that wonderful burst of speed. Again, bearing in mind that you do have to check your landing zone. It can take quite a while before you start to get confident around rays, particularly some of the larger ones. And it only takes a few times to skim over one in the shallows to give yourself a bit of a fright, but it is definitely worth persisting with. And after a while, you'll find you're getting your confidence up, and you can check them out. So what you saw me doing there was checking that landing zone, having a look if I'm going to use anything for support, and lean in and get you nice camera shots, be it stills or video footage like you're seeing here. So again, they're very docile animals. Again, another video here. This gives you an idea of how shallow we are, barely knee-deep water, and then taking the camera, dunking it into the water. And you can see there's a ray sitting right there. Of course, I knew he was there before I started filming. There's one, and there's a second one right there as well. So of course you've got to be quite careful when you are wading out into these waters. Always nice to walk with a bit of a shuffle rather than plonking your feet down. Otherwise you don't want to stomp on one of these, because they will use their defensive armament. Like I said before, the spotted all round stingery with a gorgeous colour pattern. These are one of the most beautiful ray species that we have in our waters, and depending on what background you view them over, they really stand out. These ones love hanging around the seagrass beds, and they're one of those ray species that we've started to see increasing instances of their abundance. They have become steadily more common over the last few years. What's driving that, I've got no idea, but they are again a gorgeous animal to see in the wild. Here's a beautiful big eagle ray that we saw during the Great Victorian Fish Count, December of 2015, and this is what an eagle ray looks like when you get up a bit close. This one's got that big long tail, and again just coming in a bit close. These tend to be a bit shy, if anything. The other one that you saw photographed before was quite docile. We suspect she might have been a gravid female, but what they do is this characteristic push up and then gently moving away. Now, if I had have come at that ray at a rate of knots, these have an incredible burst of speed, and they literally depart sometimes so rapidly you wonder if they were even there to begin with. But they can really hit the jets, these things. This one here, we can see, if you look closely, it's got a couple of isopod parasites clinging to it. But here you can see that gorgeous colour pattern. They start off with that lovely sort of a turquoise or aqua coloration on a fawn background, and then that tends to fade as they get to generally as they get to larger adults. They become sort of a gunmetal grey type thing. They've always reminded me of stealth bombers with the morphology of these things, the eagle rays. You do see the odd deady. Always good, I guess, to have a bit of a squiz at them and see if you can see anything that looks suspect, if there are any knife wounds or anything like that. If you see one like this on the beach, it's never a bad idea to just chat to the Parks Victoria staff and keep everyone informed as to what you're seeing. You are going to see these sorts of things from time to time. Mark giving me the thumbs up there, a bit of a plug for Parks, who have been wonderful supporters of ours for a very long time. And I should explain that Mark Rodriguez has been running a wonderful forum one called Sharing the Love now for many years, and they're a brilliant event where all the marine care groups right across the state get together and have a big exchange of ideas and views and so on. It's a wonderful event. So a massive smooth stingray. I should point out the taxonomy of a lot of these things, for those of you that are interested, has changed a lot in the last few years. These used to be called Daciatus brevicordata, but this is Baedotoschia they're now called. And these ones are one of these rays will have a stinging spine about the size of a bread knife. So they're the ones that are easily technically the most deadliest rays that we've got in our waters. Just for that reason alone, the stinging spine on them is huge. None of the venoms of these rays are particularly harmful, but if you took a hit from one of these, you'd certainly know about it, and it would require hospital treatment. So getting close to these rays, this one here I was crowding this one a little bit at Jawbone Marine Sanctuary in Williamstown, sitting over the seagrass bed there. And as you can see in this next photograph, she's had enough of me, and she's raising her tail, cocking it over her head a bit like a scorpion. And that's her way of telling me, righto, well, you're close enough, do not come any closer. Again, not using it as a offensive weapon. She's not going to swim after me and try and stab me, but if I was to glide straight over the top of her and not know she was there, then I could be in for a very rude and painful surprise. There was a returned soldier who was actually killed at St Kilda. Now, not to alarm anyone, that happened a long time ago. That was back in 1945. So these instances where rays have actually killed people, of course, our own Steve Irwin was another victim of the stingray. These are few and far between, but it's always important when you do get hit by a ray to get it looked at in hospital if need be. Here's a stingray, a smooth stingray getting mobile, and as you can see here, I'm doing the duck dive, getting in nice and close. I've got to just treat her with a fair amount of caution and respect. You don't want to get too close, but you can see she's very unhurried. I can see from her movement patterns that she's not alarmed at all, and she's making her way through the water. If the worst does happen and you do cop a hit from a stingray, then what you've got to do is remember that they've got three ways of causing problems. Number one is the sharp force trauma wound. That's the stab wound. Number two is the venom that gets injected into the wound. And number three is the bacterial infection. And that last one's quite a nasty one, because that can cause problems well after the initial drama of the sting is over. So always good to remember to use hot water, as hot as you can manage it, that can be tolerated without scalding. And the reason for that is it denatures the heat labile protein, and it may certainly provide some pretty significant pain relief. Medical attention is required in most cases, and definitely advisable due to the risk of subsequent infection. Here's one that I found stinging spine that I just happened to find west of Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary. I was just sitting in the shallows after a snorkel, and I just couldn't believe me luck when I saw this right in front of my face, and picked it up and brought it home. I wouldn't have been able to do that if it was inside the bounds of the marine sanctuary, because all the artifacts and everything are protected by law. But this one here, you can see it extends out to nearly 300 millimetres, so you do not want to cop a barb like this in the chest. There it is under a dissecting microscope, a really fearsome piece of defensive armament. Likewise, the dual stinging barbs from a stingery that I found on a beach one time, and you can see that the two barbs there. Again, looking at it under the dissecting microscope, it doesn't look terribly offensive, but when you go through and you take off that sheath, that's what you're left with. This one here was actually from a deceased eagle ray, and I've taken that out and put it in bleach and so on, and got that nice sheen to it. So it's really again the sort of thing that you don't want to come across unnecessarily. PJ Point was where I was very lucky once, January 2009, to see a mass aggregation of the Port Jackson sharks. I was in this location here, so it's a very nice area of the Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary, just as the coastline flips around into Altona Bay, near the Point Cooke homestead there. Great location to see black brim, mullet and all these sorts of things, so it's really worth checking out. I was lucky enough to get the account of the PJs put into the Victorian Naturalist Journal. They were kind enough to publish the article, and again, a beautiful animal to see as they do the rounds. They're not something that we see enormous numbers of, except for that one-off sighting where there were well over 100 to 150 females in really, really shallow water. They only have to swim a little bit and they'll leave the best swimmer for dead. They are quite a docile animal. They do have dorsal fin spines, but again, that's not a problem at all unless you grab them, which you certainly shouldn't be doing. Gummy sharks, we do see a few of at Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary. For those of you who are interested, if you jump onto YouTube and punch in gummy sharks at Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary, Peng Kwong is a guy who did some brilliant filming of the gummy sharks that were in quite an excited state as they were whizzing around through the waters of Point Cooke. Now, when we discuss sharks, just as we get towards closing up the presentation, finishing up the presentation and opening up the floor for questions, the obvious question is, well, you've got 2 harmless sharks there. Are any others in the waters there that could cause us problems? And truth be known, they have been seen off Point Cooke, but a fair way out. As you can see, this is from quite a while ago. This is 1999, where a very large great white shark was seen off the off Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary. You can see the schematic there of the white pointer compared to the Holden Astra and the white pointer wins. So it was quite a shark. It was, you know, somewhere between, we're not sure, but somewhere between 5 and 6 metres long. People thought they were looking at 2 sharks when in fact it was just the one that was bolted together, the dorsal and the caudal fins. And then again in 2009, a very large shark was seen. Now, they're not the sort of thing that are going to cause problems around Point Cooke. Do you need to take any specific precautions? No, you don't. You can see there it was seen a long way from shore near the P2 marker, but they're not the sort of thing you need to panic or worry about. You know, if you're going out off certain areas of the Victorian coastline, yeah, you may potentially have to bear it in the back of your mind. But around Port Phillip Bay, we've got a tremendous record with regards to the large and potentially dangerous sharks. We just really do not see too many of them at all. Doesn't mean they're not out there, and there have been people that have been approached. But again, the difference between you know, having a shark attack someone or just cruise past, they're very different scenarios. And I'm happy to say most of the time, you know, people either don't know they're there or the shark might investigate them and take off. It's not the Jaws scenario where people are necessarily going to be cut in half left, right and centre. Just it doesn't happen around our beautiful Port Phillip Bay. So if you're interested in checking us out, come and have a look at our Facebook page. Just do a search for Marine Care Point Cooke and you'll find us. Also, as a matter of interest, for those of you that are interested in the marine biology and aquaculture side of things, we've got our Aquaculture Training and Applied Research Centre at the Epping campus. By all means, come and check us out and pay us a visit. I've got my contact details there for anyone who wants to give me a yell, and I'll just close up now by saying thank you very much for your attention, and very happy to open up for questions.
That's wonderful, Andrew. Thank you so much for that very informative and very comprehensive presentation. You've certainly got some magnificent video footage and images there that you've been sharing this afternoon, so really appreciate the effort. Been very busy on the chat room. We've had lots of good questions coming in, so we might start with some of them. Not surprisingly, when the theme of sharks comes up, the first one to come up is about baby sharks. Now, I'm sure you've all got that instantly, got that little that thing going on in your head at the moment, but the question around the baby sharks was, and I'll just have to quickly flick back to it. Where did it go? The question was really around, do these sharks come out of eggs or are they born alive? Where do they actually come from, Andrew? Can you give us a bit of the life story?
Yes, well, it's actually it's a great question. The sharks do vary enormously in terms of whether they're born live. They've actually got 3 different modes of reproduction, so they can effectively be born live, or they can be born as in terms of egg laying. So probably the best example there, and I really should have included it in my presentation, a number of times when we've been beachcombing or looking around the beach at Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary, we have seen the gorgeous Port Jackson shark egg. And for those that haven't seen one, if you see something that's sort of like almost looks like a miniature spiral staircase, that's a Port Jackson shark egg. And we do see ray eggs and all that sort of thing washed up on the beach. In all the time I've been seeing them, I've only ever seen one viable egg that was we knew there was something at home because it was still very heavy. The rest have been more the egg cases. So the egg has been laid and then they burst out, hatch out, and away they go. So yeah, it does vary considerably depending on the species, but the PJs are probably the one to look out for. I've never seen more PJ egg cases on a beach anywhere in my life other than Jervis Bay in New South Wales. The whole beach is festooned with these eggs everywhere, so the population is presumably doing pretty well up there.
And how long do they stay in their egg cases for, Andrew?
Oh, the gestation period for sharks, again, it does vary a bit, and sharks have got this incredible capacity to where the male and the female might mate, and the female will say, yeah, but conditions aren't great at the moment, I just might wait a while, and then she'll actually use the male sperm when she sees fit, so they can actually store the sperm and then decide, righto, now I'm going to get pregnant, bang, and away they go. So it generally tends to be considerably more than the 9-month gestation that we have for humans, so it's not unusual for it to extend beyond 11 or 12 months.
Thanks, Andrew. Here's another question from Anonymous. Hi, g'day, Anonymous. How you going? Where do the smooth rays and eagle rays go when the water gets colder? We haven't seen many since last February. This is on the Bass Coast. Any thoughts around temperature and shark movements?
Yes, well, that's why I would love to one day do a study one fine day on the southern fiddler rays. I think that'd make an incredible citizen science project. Look, to answer that question properly, you're probably going to have to start fitting some pretty sophisticated tags to the animals to see where they go. And we've seen some incredible data coming in recent times with snapper. Paul Hamer at the Victorian Fisheries Authority has done some great work on tagging a bunch of snapper and seeing where they go. And they've got this amazing ability to leave the bay, go where they're going, migrate, and then come back almost a year later to the day. It's really amazing data. So we'd love to see the exact same thing with the eagle rays and things. They're probably migrating north. Now, when I say that, what we tend to find with a lot of different populations is you'll have some that'll break off and head west, others will head north. So it really probably, again, varies a little bit. I'm sorry to be a bit wishy-washy on this, but the fact of the matter is that we don't probably have a whole hell of a lot of information on where these things actually do go. Like I said, I was a bit surprised that I saw a sparsely spotted stingaree in the water at Point Cooke Marine Sanctuary in pretty shallow water in the month of May. Generally, these things are well and truly packing up and going, and it's a bit of a paradox because, as a lot of you will know, when you get that light northerly breeze blowing, the water's flat as a tack, the visibility is the best it's been all year, but unfortunately there's not a whole lot of fish or rays around. They all tend to migrate, so where they actually go, I'm pretty sure a lot of them would leave the heads and head south initially and then break off, and some would head west, some would break off and go north to the warmer climes.
Thanks, Andrew. Question here from Diane Jackson. Thanks for your question, Diane. In fact, you've got two questions here. One is about the southern fiddler ray. Are they the only ones that can't hurt you at all or not harmful? And the second question, which I think you probably answered the question itself, is what rays inhabit Swan Bay in the Port Phillip Heads Marine National Park?
Oh, good question. The one that I haven't covered is now I know it's Urolophus cruciatus, so I'm going to have to try and think what the common name is. It'll come to me in a moment. It's an interesting ray species with a relatively short tail, quite commonly seen around estuaries and things. That's one that we've never seen at Point Cooke or Jawbone, but you do tend to get it in those southern waters. So around Swan Bay and things, that's a recognised haunt of gummy sharks as well. So you'll see a lot of the ray species that I've highlighted here. Back to the original question about the southern fiddlers, the answer to the question is yes. They are about the only ray that is totally harmless out of all of the ones that I've highlighted. All of the rest do have stinging barbs. Where the barbs are located does vary a bit in terms of positioning along that spinal column. So the ones that the stingarees, they have more power, but the trade-off is that they're only about the length of a toothpick. When you look at the southern, the smooth stingrays, they're much closer to the discs. They potentially have a bit less power, but they're much longer. So they're the ones you don't want to disturb when you swim straight over the top of them. And the guy who was killed at St Kilda, he probably just startled the ray, swam with his chest very close to the bottom, and got cracked in the chest, took a hit through the heart and lungs. So again, I don't want to alarm anyone there, but you do need to know what's in the water and how to treat them and how to respect them and how to look for them, more importantly, because like I say, once you see them, then the battle's over. You're not going to get you shouldn't get done unless you get way too close.
Yep. That's all very good advice. And again, the important thing there is be sensible, treat everything in the water with respect. The next question is sort of related. This is from our friends in Coast Care Port Phillip. Can rays detect the vibration resulting from the movement of people's feet? And we often hear about if you're in sort of murky water to shuffle your feet as you're going along. Any response to that one?
Yeah, right. I think a lot of these animals, the rays, the sharks, these things, they've got phenomenal ability to detect movement. And if you look at some of the shark and ray species, they've got electrosensory systems and things. They can. It's been said that some of these animals can actually detect fish, if you're looking at things like flounder and things buried below the surface of the sand. They can actually detect in some cases their heartbeat. So the answer to that question is yes. Almost certainly when you get a human lumbering along in the water, I've got zero doubt that they'll be able to know that we're coming. Now, if you do blindside them and you come up from behind them, they do have eyes that are particularly good in terms of being able to swivel to an extent. But if you do blindside them, they'll almost certainly know you're there from vibrations in the water. I think the thing to remember there, though, is that if you're looking at, say, something like a snake, they might feel the vibrations. A tiger snake, for example, they might feel it, and then they'll feel you coming, and they'll actually take off and take evasive action well before you get there, well before you know they're even there. Rays are a bit different. They'll rely on their camouflage, and they'll just sort of sit around and think, oh, this passing potential threat, it's probably going to do that. It's probably just going to go straight past. And that's something that allows you to get very close and get some wonderful photographs and things of them when they're in the water. They are quite docile. But yeah, definitely to answer the question, yeah, they'll know we're there. And just because we don't see them, remember, it doesn't necessarily mean they're not there. When they don't want to be seen, they're very, very good at remaining hidden.
Great, thanks. That's a great answer. Question from our colleague Andrew Vance. G'day, Andrew. Hope you're doing well. My son Flynn would like to know if an eagle ray can sting you. He accidentally stood on one last summer at Aireys Inlet. What do you reckon about that one?
Yeah, well, the eagle ray is a nice example because it hasn't got an overly massive stinging spine. I mean, a good spine would be, you're looking at around, a big one would be about probably 5 inches long. And the thing with the eagle rays is that spine is located much closer to the disc. It's not sitting at the end of the tail like a stingaree, which can develop tremendous power. So they're the sort of thing that you're generally not going to get stung by. It's a smallish spine, and the eagle, relative to the size of the eagle ray, it's relatively very small. So they certainly can get you. Probably the thing to watch out for is the eagle rays have sometimes been shown to when it's probably more relevant with an eagle ray when you're fishing, and if you catch one, they have been known to hit the jets, like I was saying before, and they can in fact leap into boats. And there was a tragic case, not involving an eagle ray. I think from memory, it might have, I forget exactly what species it was, but it was up in Yeppoon in far north Queensland. And a father and son team were in the boat, and a ray leapt into the boat, and in doing so, it come into contact with the youngster's chest. And the father had a look, and there was a small trickle of blood coming from right in the middle of his chest there. So the father thought, well, because it's a ray injury, I don't want to take any chances with that. And then took the kid off to hospital. They took one look at him and thought, yeah, he's okay. It's just a superficial wound, and let him go. And I think it was either that night or the following night he went to bed and unfortunately never woke up again. So from now on, from then on, the medical procedures around ray injuries to the chest changed, and they said, well, it's not good enough to just have a look at it or an X-ray. They go the full CT or MRIs. What had happened there was the kid had been hit in his chest. It had just penetrated his heart like a sort of a slow leak, but in doing so, it had put a toxin in there, and that caused that leak to get bigger and bigger. And then the poor kid died in his sleep after exhibiting virtually zero ill effects after the injury. So yeah, it is one of those things to be careful of. Again, it's the number of people that have been killed by rays worldwide is very, very, very small. So again, not wanting to freak anyone out, and I'll be disappointed if that is an outcome of this session, but you do need to know what's in the water and how it can affect you, and then of course the basic first aid and hospital admissions where warranted. So to answer the question, that's a long-winded answer, I know, but yes, eagle rays can definitely get you, but you really almost have to give them a bear hug to cop an injury like that from an eagle ray.
All right, well, look, that's most of the questions. There's a couple of others which I might try and answer myself in a moment, so I might just flick myself back onto the screen. So thanks, firstly, Andrew, for that fantastic presentation and being so open and generous with your time this afternoon. Really appreciate you sharing your beautiful images, etc. And whether it's through this forum or through the other events that we have, like the Sharing the Love events that you've been a great participant in since day one. Really thank you very much as for the great work that you as a volunteer do.
It's an absolute pleasure.
The question that I did want to just take on notice, and it was from Sam, who lives in Bairnsdale, wondering about volunteering in the Bairnsdale area. I'll put you in touch separately, Sam, with some of our colleagues in East Gippsland. Yes, we do have an active friends group associated with Beware Reef, and the magnificent Don Love, who will be presenting as part of this Winter by the Sea series in a few weeks' time, is probably the best person to speak to there. I'll also put you in touch with our Coast Care colleagues, Bethany in Coast Care in Bairnsdale as well. I should be able to help you link up with some of those wonderful volunteer activities happening across that marine and coastal space in East Gippsland. That's the end of our first session for today, and I just wanted to say in closing, thanks to all of you for participating today. I know it's a bit different to sort of like connect online, and many of us have been having family chats, friends chats, etc., using this sort of format. So you're probably getting a little bit too much screen time of late and not enough beach time or sea time. But hopefully this way that we're trying to reach out to you and help to keep you connected with our beautiful coastal and marine environments is something a little bit different and something you can look forward to. I'd encourage you to, if you haven't already, to look at the rest of the program, and obviously those of you who have registered today and got the information, you are registered, but encourage you to think about sharing that information. If you've enjoyed today's sessions, or you see other people, or you know others that might be interested, please send them the registration link so that they can join our next session. Quick plug for the next session, Professor John Arnold from Deakin University. John's a wildlife biologist, a marine wildlife biologist. He's going to be doing a presentation on monitoring large megafauna, or basically looking at large marine animals, including seals, dolphins, looking at seabirds in particular. It'll be a fantastic insight into how we can understand some of these large mysterious creatures that come and go. We see them here, and then we don't see them again, but they have lives, and John's going to tell us a bit more about how we can get an insight into what they do when we can't actually see them. Thanks very much again, as I said, to Andrew. Great to have this first session under the belt now. Thanks to Catherine for the tech support in the background. Fortunately, I don't think you had too many challenges today, Catherine. Yep, giving me the thumbs down sign, so that's all good. We will follow up, and I will make this session available as a recording after the event. You can come back to it by using exactly the same link that you've used to connect into it today for the recording, which will be available in about 20 minutes or so for those of you who might like to watch it again or to share it with other people. But thank you. Please join us again for our next Winter by the Sea event in a couple of weeks, in Tuesday, 2 weeks' time from today. On behalf of Parks Victoria, Coast Care Victoria, thank you for joining us. And at the start of National Volunteer Week, thank you for the work that you do to help look after Victoria's beautiful, magnificent marine and coastal environment. Ciao for now.